We need to upgrade how we think and how we decide. It's funny because our phones, we have a phone upgrade every few weeks, every month. All our applications on our computers and our operating systems are constantly upgraded. And when's the last time humans upgraded themselves? Yeah. And I think it's time that we became kinder to each other. Given the level of intelligence we have in this world, the resources we have, the technology we have in this world, there is absolutely zero reason why not every single person on this planet has access to education, access to housing, access to clean water, access to sanitation, and access to basic things that are, linked to human dignity. Until that happens, I think it is ridiculous for us to pat ourselves on the back and saying what a wonderful job we're doing. I think we're failing. So if we want AI to be an ally to humanity, what does that mean? First of all, it's going to be trust by design. It's going to be trusted. What does that mean? Well, privacy matters, right? So if I'm having a conversation with an LLM and the company can actually see what those conversations are, well, that's not trust by design and it's not privacy by design. He smiled. He said, I'm really, really, really glad to see that integrity is the backbone of this. And keep telling people until your last breath that integrity and profit are not at odds with each other. When you are building, like a huge power plant or a water desal plant or any huge infrastructure, if you can't trust your partners to do their piece, you're never going to deliver anything.
Welcome to another episode of The Future of Learning, where we explore how organizations are navigating the tension between technological acceleration and human capability development. Today's conversation is about something most organizations get completely wrong when they adopt AI. They focus on the technology whilst ignoring the capital, governance, and human character that actually determines whether AI serves us or harms us. My guest is Deborah Webster, founder and CEO of Amani Labs, author of Better Than Your Behaviour, and someone who operates at the intersection of AI ethics, impact investing, and responsible innovation. She's built her career on a provocative premise: if we misalign capital, we misalign AI. Now, Deborah doesn't do corporate platitudes. She's criticized the startup ecosystem for backing Me Too ideas whilst overlooking true innovators. She's argued that we lack the character maturity to handle the technologies we're deploying, and she's challenging the toxic belief that ethics and profit are at odds. This is a conversation about what it actually takes to build AI that people can trust and why most organizations are getting it wrong. Is that a fair introduction, Deborah?
Yikes. Talk about a high bar.
Well, there we go. Okay, well, let's just crack straight on. So let's start with your core argument, Deborah. If we misalign capital, we misalign AI. Now, what do you mean by that? And where are you seeing this play out?
So when it comes to regulation and the narratives, there's a lot of noise around people saying, "Oh, wait for the regulation to tell us what we need to do." But if you look at what's happening, our current kind of rollout of AI is akin to rolling out really, really fast cars with no seatbelts, no brakes, and the materials that don't absorb the impact when we actually know better. So I have seen if you think about it, it is illogical and impossible to have ethical tech coming from unethical founders, right? The two go hand in hand because ethics it's about knowing what your moral compass is, having the courage to live by those principles. Because we don't live in a black and white world. We live in shades of gray, and being able to navigate the complexity of the trade-offs, I think takes a lot of insight and a lot of, long-term value and impact versus short-term uptake. And one of the things I did is I mapped all the inflection points of where the technology goes off-piste. So first, it's the character, and by character, that means personality. I mean the backbone, the courage to do what is right, even in difficult circumstances. That is character. So the alignment between the character of the founder and what they're building, the co-founders, the core founding team. Then there's the alignment or misalignment to the investors. So we've seen a lot of pressure on founders spending the majority of their time fundraising instead of actually building the company and building the tech. And so as they burn through cash, they're put in an increasingly vulnerable position as to which investor to take on board. Now, if the investors put pressure on them to bring product to market and taking shortcuts, then you are very, very likely to have toxic tech. So this is what I mean by we have toxic capital, you will have toxic tech. And then there's these other inflection points. And the other interesting thing I've seen in the ecosystem, which I sometimes naughtily refer to as the ecosystem, is investing in this space is actually a team sport. I know that sounds really, really odd, but the early stage investors, so the angels, take the biggest risk. But then as every single round of investment comes in, a lot of the earlier investors tend to get pushed out. Certain investors act like gorillas in the room. They throw their weight around. They put very, very one-sided rules of the game toward in their favor. And then so you see other investors being ignored or being massively diluted. You see founders being diluted with less say as to the direction of the tech. So there's these really fascinating human factors behind the technology, which I think are really, really overlooked. And most investors fail to do due diligence on.
So,
sorry, that was a lot to unpack.
There was a lot to unpack there, it really was. So, we talk about, ethical tech, and moral compasses, but who sets the bar on that?
That's a great question. That's a really, really good question. So I remember a few years ago, I was at this event and someone said, we should drop the notion of ethical tech and only call it responsible tech because there's too many different ethics in this world. Well, if you think about it, the power and potential of technology such as AI is that we can actually bring all the different ethical principles to some form of balance, right? We talk about how certain technology democratizes A, B, C, X, Y, Z. In the reality, as soon as I hear we're democratizing X, it's the last thing that's being democratized. We do have the haves and have-nots in this world. We have certain players in a certain concentration of this technology in certain parts of the world where other parts of the world don't have an equal say. That also plays out in terms of data representation and algorithms. So let's just take an example. Let's just say you have a piece of tech and the data that fuels it is based on Western men and women of a particular age group. That piece of tech will not be beneficial if you roll it out, for instance, in sub-Saharan Africa, even certain parts of Europe, Asia, the Middle East, because people are different, right? And if you have tech that doesn't work, it also can cause harm if people are oblivious to what to look for, if that makes sense.
So what do you mean by what to look for? So you say it would be dangerous if people don't know what to look for. So what unpack that for me a little bit.
Okay. So this comes to procurement, right? If the people procuring the technology don't know the key questions to ask for, and they kind of go with the status quo, then the wrong technology gets implemented and gets harmful. So let me give you a really simple example in terms of hiring tools. So if the algorithm was built based on profiles and CVs of people who were already in the company and successful, you're actually building a piece of tech with a lot of biases built in.
Uh-huh.
And just because those people were successful, it doesn't mean that another configuration of person won't be successful either.
Uh-huh.
So I think we need to be much smarter in creating inclusive technology, not replicating the biases that are already in systems. So see, when you look at how this technology is being implemented in some companies, what fascinates me is that many companies are deploying it in business as usual, the status quo, current modus operandi. But that is, so it's an efficiency game, etc. When one considers that many of the systems that we have in this world are broken in some way, shape, or form, we're actually concretizing those broken systems. And hence, we are amplifying the harms in those systems. What we should be doing instead, and where the real value is taking a step back and saying, right, in this company, we normally do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. What we wanted to do is 1, 2, 3, which we couldn't before because of lack of resources. Can AI help us do that? Identify those pathways, reverse engineer it, and those are the use cases that should be tested, deployed, and accelerated. But I think we have what excites me about this moment in time is that we have a moment in history where we could really, gosh, it's potentially game-changing. The power and potential of this technology is mind-blowing, but we have to upgrade how we think, which we're not doing, and that's
Well,
problematic.
that brings me nicely into the next question, because you've argued that we don't have the character maturity to handle the technologies we're deploying. So that's a fundamental critique, yeah, not just of business practice, but of human nature. So what made you reach that conclusion?
Gosh, look at the world around us. So before COVID, I was writing a book on how humans can stay relevant in a technologically obsessed world. I didn't think anyone would be particularly interested in this book at the time. Gosh, I got that wrong. But joking aside, a founder of a company I invested in a very long time ago got in touch with me just a few months before ChatGPT came out. And he said, Deb, I've been playing with something new. I'm going to send you the login details. Have a go. Let me know what you think. And let's come up with some ways that we could put this to market. And it was an LLM, and this thing blew me away. And I woke up at 4:00 one morning and got my laptop. And the prompt was, you are Socrates and you've returned to Earth. What is your view of humanity? It was an absolutely fascinating take on, because there's so many amazing things, like it's things that we take for granted, like waking up in the morning and having running hot water. This is amazing. There are many parts of the world that don't have access to clean water, sanitation, etc. So it's really easy to get, comfortable in our own comfort, and we forget what others don't have. Given the level of intelligence we have in this world, the resources we have, the technology we have in this world, there is absolutely zero reason why not every single person on this planet has access to education, access to housing, access to clean water, access to sanitation, and access to basic things that are, linked to human dignity. And until that happens, I think it is ridiculous for us to pat ourselves on the back and saying what a wonderful job we're doing. I think we're failing.
So let's, so anybody listening could not obviously, could not argue against anything you just said. You mentioned in the sort of beginning part about that you found, through the investment cycle, eventually, certainly with more successful startups, big hitter, the more of the bigger hitters come in, if you like, and they start to dictate the rules of the investment game because they want, they're the bigger fish. They might be the bigger boy, the bigger whatever people in the room, and they're going to go, right, this is what happens now, right?
So not all of them, but some of them.
But that does happen quite a lot, right? So is there not a worry that whilst we're still figuring out how it's completely imbalanced and unfair that there are people in this world that still can't have access to a clean toilet, that the people with the power and the money are just going to dictate the rules of the game when it comes to AI and technology, because they've already got the power and the influence to be able to dictate what happens with that technology and how it will be utilized. So how on earth do you get to a point where it becomes a balanced playing field when the rules of the game have already been made?
This is what keeps me up at night. So that's already happening, and you're absolutely right. One of the things that drives me nuts is how people think, well, this is just the way this is just the way it is, and we can't do anything about it. If we look back in history, so there's one thing AIs like, so LLMs and other types of AI are really good at finding patterns, right? So if we look back at the pattern of human history, we will find what we did really well, what we did really badly, and we could learn from that. It's something my mom used to say to me, actually, which inspired the title of the book, which was, when I criticize you, it's not you I criticize, but your behavior, because you're better than your behavior. But which for me is always the distinction between people and our behavior and humanity and our potential. And what inspires me about AI and other technologies is that designed the right way, deployed the right way, it could help us bring out the best in us. But there's an equation for that. Unfortunately, a lot of technology is being developed and deployed to take advantage of our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses. So, and we saw this, for instance, in social media, where we love drama. Drama fuels algorithms. And when you see the negative consequences of that, it's diabolical. If you look at what happened in Myanmar, it's diabolical. Did anything happen to these companies? No, they're still in business. When we look back in time and we look at Arthur Andersen and Enron, Arthur Andersen were held responsible and culpable in what happened in Enron. They were later exonerated, but in the meantime, the company folded from that one instance. Okay, yes, it was a huge instance, but if we look at history as to what's happened since, it seems the toxicity of business has accelerated, and when it comes to AI, it's even more worrisome. So a lot of AI currently is being developed and deployed by a handful of companies in the States. There are some major players in China, but let's just focus on the States for the time being, where the playbook of Silicon Valley of move fast and break things is still the playbook that's being utilized. You have some founders, some amazing researchers in different parts of the world, the States, a lot in Europe, the UK, who want to build more positive uses of the technology. But there's a double bind here, because number one, we need to be able to give them the investment capital they need to grow. And in the meantime, we need to mitigate the risk from them being thrown huge checks to draw them into big tech. Because if they're drawn into big tech, there's a double whammy. The beautiful technology these people could have built will never see the light of day. And the current playbook of AI will just get amplified and accelerated even more. And so and this is where the character play comes in. It's not, you can't just have ethical founders. You need to have ethical investors. You need to have ethical customers. Customers need to, so when you're looking at B2B plays, the people buying the technology in companies need to wisen up into the questions they need to ask. There's some phenomenal work by the AI Procurement Lab that enables people to understand and navigate the complexity of procuring this technology, and to do so with open eyes. I also have the privilege of being a fellow with ForHumanity, and ForHumanity has decoded a lot of the different rules around the world and created audit criteria around them. There's another company called Assessed Intelligence that has got all the different regulations around the world, all the different standards, and put it into one framework so that people can navigate it, use as a map so they don't get lost in all the different regs. So there are solutions out there, but we need to stop being lazy and finding them. So yeah, there are solutions.
Very good. I think it's good to have. It's good to know that there are organizations out there beating the drum and trying to, swerve the ship in a different direction potentially. I just hope, Deborah, like you, that there are enough people who don't follow the money trail. I mean, it's so hard to in this world anyway. The gap between the rich and poor has never been wider, I don't think, in terms of resources at the top to the resources at the bottom. And it could be so hard as someone who's sort of trying to, develop a company or utilize technologies within a company and not take the shorter, probably easier route, right? Because it probably would be. Someone waves a check at you and goes, look, we'll give you this much, just take the company in that direction. You'd be like, oh, okay, got mouths to feed, I've got and like how, and that's where that moral, ethical compass goes, well, hang on, who are you and what are you going to do with it?
For sure.
And that's those are sometimes questions, the answers sometimes we don't want to know because it's easier just to take the money, right?
Interesting. So a lot of people talk about FOMO. I talk about FOFO, which is fear of finding out, which is exactly your point. Absolutely. Look, it's I don't say this lightly. In my own personal life and my own business interactions, I have put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and withdrawn my money where I see things that are not what it says on the tin, as they say. But look, so when I was with Korn Ferry, I had the privilege of working across a number of different sectors, mainly focused in the Middle East. One of them was in financial services. And I had this amazing client who I think is probably, I would say he's the best investment banker in the world.
Okay.
And a lot of people see these people as blood-sucking vampires. But the really, really bright investment bankers are really not. And I often say, we want to tackle things like climate change. We need these people in the room because I learned so much from these people. And this particular individual was working with an institution where they had patient capital. All their investments were about building the infrastructure and building companies that enable the Middle East region to grow and to prosper. So the ethos was on point, but what they did in practice was in complete alignment. So it wasn't say one thing and do another. And when he found out about what I was doing with Amani Labs, he smiled. He's like, I'm really, really, really glad to see that integrity is the backbone of this. And keep telling people until your last breath that integrity and profit are not at odds with each other. It's when you are building, like a huge power plant or a water desal plant or any huge infrastructure, you can't trust your partners to do their piece. They're never going to, you're never going to deliver anything. There's a book called Entrepreneurship as a Path to Peace. And it's when countries trade with each other, it's about integrity and mutual trust. But it's got to be a win-win. If it's one-sided, that relationship will be short-lived.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It needs to, it needs equity. Of course, absolutely. But two sides have to have the same goals.
Before we continue, a quick thank you from our sponsor, OpenElm's Learning Generator. With just a text prompt or document, AI instantly builds a full professional course complete with video presenters, quizzes, animations, and voiceovers in any language. You can edit everything online and export it as e-learning, a PowerPoint or video. You can even export it as a podcast or video game experience. The best part, you can try it free for 14 days and see how you can use this special agentic AI system to transform your training at openelms.ai. Back to the show.
So many companies have mission statements, values, CSR departments, whilst their core business practices cause harm. How do you distinguish between genuine ethical commitment and performative responsibility, especially when evaluating founders or investors?
Great question. So I have a red list.
Wow.
So
Wow. I hope
so
I'm not
there are particular companies and founders that they will be doing something and it just doesn't ring true. And so I put them on the red list and I start to monitor them. And this started a while ago. It started when I was just leaving search. And this is actually how I got into water poverty and water issues around the world. So there was a water privatization deal in South America where the tariffs that were set were too high for the poor members of the community to afford. And so the water supply was cut off. And one of the unintended consequences was little girls were bullied and teased when they went to school because they were dirty because they couldn't wash. This is really unkind, right? Like it's so... Now, the people behind the deal, so I did research on the company behind the transaction. And this is one of the best companies, really smart people doing these deals, right? These guys are not stupid. And back to your point, beautiful mission, lovely values, CSR initiative. And I thought to myself, how can you have CSR, so corporate social responsibility, when your business practices cause harm? I'm not a big believer in CSR. I'm also not a big believer in social entrepreneurship, which may sound odd for some people.
I will come back to that, but I can see why. But go
on. So if we go back to the original purpose of business, you would solve a problem, you would add value, and that's how you made money. This notion slowly but surely got corrupted along the way. And, some profit is great, but there is a difference between X profit and greed level profit. There's a difference between equitable profit and profit where one gains to the cost of everybody else, regardless of consequences. And it's up to us to navigate where that line is. And this comes back to principles, this comes back to character. And one of the best ways to navigate this space is the virtues and the vices. You can have one trait, you take it to one extreme, and it becomes toxic. So there are many great, brilliant old books out there that I really would love to see some LLMs trained on it. I did an experiment with a GPT last year on could I develop a GPT that would enable people to make more responsible decisions. And it was really, really fun doing it. I just had a bee in my bonnet about it. And before I knew, I sent it to a couple of people just to kind of, test. And this is how I've been playing with. And within about a week, about 100 people were testing it. The feedback was phenomenal. And it was just, it just made me giggle. Like the things that I spend years kind of wrecking my brain over on, how do I hack this versus something that, I did in one night because I was just bugged. And yes, I had a lot of the case studies, I had a lot of the research, and it was really fun doing all this prompting. But anyway, I digressed. How do you tell the difference between one and the other? It's not so much what people say, it's what they don't say. It's the spaces in between. You have to have such intense listening. So there is one company where the founder is seen to be more ethical than another founder of another LLM company. They position themselves as far more ethical. But there's little things like, 1 minute you're saying how you're concerned about the harms of this technology, but in the very next breath, you're rolling it out still at breakneck speed. This is a gap between what you say and what you do. That gets you on the red list. Criticizing the Middle East region because they have this particular view of the region, wrongly so, oftentimes. It fascinates me how people have the audacity of making judgment calls on the Middle East when very few of them have actually been to the Middle East. Then they seem to have no compunction in coming to raise capital in the Middle East. If I were an investor in the Middle East, anyone who's criticized the Middle East, for me, is off my list. And I think we should be brutal in that way. And the Middle East, I think, has a unique opportunity in being leaders in responsible and ethical AI. And I don't mean from necessarily building the technology. I mean by setting the standards of the companies that they invest in. We're already deploying a lot of capital in the data centers and the backbone and sovereign AI and etc. But a lot of companies from around the world come here to raise capital. And so one of my wishes is to see the amazing people from this part of the world living by their values, the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on how to instill decency and human respect in this technology. It's not just about ethical, responsible AI. I would like to see a future where AI is truly an ally to humanity and not a threat to humanity. There is no reason whatsoever why the two cannot live in symbiotic harmony together.
You think the Middle East is well placed?
I do. We have all the ingredients for it. The question is time and really truly following through with that potential. The potential is there. Whether we execute upon it or not is another matter.
Yeah. Well, before I move on to the next question, I just want to tail back a little bit. You said you didn't really believe in CSR. I think I know why. I have my own views on it, but tell us more about why, because I think that's good. Because there's a lot of companies out there that say, they go, well, we've got CSR, so we're all right. So why are you skeptical of CSR just as a term?
So I was raised Catholic, right? And so, when I was a kid, I'm not supposed to, one of the things about being Catholic, you're not supposed to say what you say in confessions. But, as a kid, I'd say I disobeyed my mom and, 3 Hail Marys, I'm off. And I remember my mom used to say, just because you now have your penance and you're clean, it doesn't mean that you should repeat that. So CSR is your business practices cause harm, and then you have this CSR do-gooding initiative to kind of cleanse your soul. It doesn't cut it. If you truly are a smart company, if you are truly innovative, not only would you not have CSR, you would proactively identify 1 to 3 core places where you cause harm. And I don't mean nibbling at the edges. I mean really get to the heart and soul as to where you cause harm. The likelihood is other companies in other sectors are causing that harm too, and collaborate. This is success of the future. We will not tackle these solutions working in silos and working on our own. And I think that makes companies far more attractive to top talent. Top talent are massively intelligent. And I think it's time that companies stopped insulting people's intelligence both from a talent perspective and from a consumer perspective. I also don't believe in social entrepreneurship because the very term, and I respect social entrepreneurs. I love what social entrepreneurs are aspiring to do. It's very, very noble. I also believe that business done well is extremely noble. But the issue with social entrepreneurship is we create this subsector. And by having this subsector, we subconsciously give permission to regular entrepreneurs to cause harm because they're different. No. You're all entrepreneurs. You're all building businesses. And so the game is maximize value, solve the problems without minimizing the harms. Now that's a really cool game. If you think about it from a puzzle perspective, that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I really do like your analogy of CSR as some form of penance that people try to say. I think it's very good. Okay. You've said that every inflection point from bringing in investors to building teams, good intentions can be derailed. So can you walk me through a specific example where you've seen promising technology become harmful because of misaligned incentives?
Gosh, how long is a piece of string? It's not just about misaligned incentives. It's people saying one thing before they come on board and then behave a completely different way afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say a very high profile company in Europe, some of the top researchers, investors go in, and you start to see some of the top talent and some of the founders leave. This is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens behind the scenes is that the investors say one thing in order to bring the capital in because they want access to, because there's this race, right, for having access to the top and most promising companies. But then once they're in, then they start to derail and putting pressure on bringing products to market, taking shortcuts when it comes to responsibility, to doing the safety checks, to doing the audits, and there's no reason for it. The companies that will win in the future are the ones that are trusted, truly trusted, and they're trusted like not just because of some nice marketing spiel, but they deliver on that, and they are the ones that will bring about breakthrough returns. The alternatives are not futures that we want. The alternatives are, number one, you have some of the most toxic technology which is embedded in companies and it is too costly to change it out. So we have no choice but to use it. That is not a good future for anyone because people will use the technology but feel like this anxiety inside. And I think that's wrong. I think the stress levels and mental health crisis on this planet is already at a level that we need to reduce that massively. And the other is that there's a major blow up and there's an AI winter. And I don't think that is a good option for us as well either, because the potential of this technology and the promise of the technology will never be realized. And I think that would be a great shame.
Yeah, absolutely. Our focus in these series has been around, not always, but mainly around sort of learning and organizational capability. So as organizations rush to implement AI for training, development, what's the question most L&D leaders aren't asking but desperately need to at this point?
Oh, gosh. So ForHumanity just finished the most extensive piece of work on AEDTs. AEDTs are automatic employment decision tools. There are about 65 different use cases. And being part of that working group, we used to have these fantastic debates because, so I'll give you an example. One of the use cases we were looking at was a coaching tool. And the question was posed, well, does a company have rights to the data of the coaching tool? And some people that were from the States straight away said, yes, of course. And I was like, well, hold on a second. When I had my coaching clients, and they're in the corporate world, all my clients knew that I would not give them any information about the conversations with their talent unless I had express permission from their people and they knew exactly what I was going to share with the company. Because otherwise, you have no trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have these tools and the company is harvesting this data, it's not the data that matters, it's the insights from the data. And unfortunately, there is huge mission creep in these. So just you're using a piece of tech for coaching. Those data and the insights are viewed by people in management and HR. And then, God forbid, but in certain cases, that data can then be weaponized against the individuals when, for instance, you're trying to figure out who to lay off. And it is that mission creep of this technology that is extremely concerning. So if anyone is deploying or purchasing any of these tools, I do highly recommend going to the ForHumanity site and getting access to the AEDT. Like it was 3 years of work by some of the most brilliant people who specialize in this field. And there's no reason at all why companies should be buying a piece of tech because, company X uses it too. I don't care. The majority of technology in this space is toxic, unethical, and it is not in humans for their well-being. There is a phenomenal book called The Algorithm that I highly recommend to people to read. And it's funny how a lot of people are worried about losing jobs because of AI. So there are two things I'd like to clarify on this point. Number one, if employees knew the toxicity of some of the tools these companies are using, I think they would question whether they want to work with those companies or not. That's number one. And the second point is that research from Gallup shows that only about 23% of the global working population are engaged at work. The remainder are either coasting or they're negatively engaged. So what we should be doing is really breaking down the minute data around the 23% of massively engaged people. We make sure that the technology isn't displacing them or disengaging them. And then we find those ingredients and we do our best. We leverage this technology to get those ingredients to see if we can enable other people to also be engaged, because work is a crucial part of our waking days and our waking life. There are 3 different types of work. On one hand, there's jobs, which are just on board. Second is careers. But if I'm a Webster, right? So I always play with words. And if you look it up in the dictionary, it means that you're going super, super fast, which probably explains career burnout. Because, there's a bend in the road, you're going to go flying off the edge. The third is meaningful work. And by meaningful work, I'm not talking about being, a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon. Anyone can have meaningful work, from a waiter or a waitress all the way to the CEO or a brain surgeon. It's about loving what you do and being totally present. And I think if we were to automate the magic kind of what brings people joy, I think that'd be really sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are ways of re-engineering the workplace to think differently and leverage these tools in a very different way.
Yeah, I think, we've had a number of conversations during this series, and there's a real kind of spectrum of where people feel technology is enabling or not enabling the development of humans. I kind of still think that it's a future where people who don't use AI at all will be kind of replaced by people who use AI effectively. But I think spinning it slightly into where you're coming from, I think what we kind of really hope for is that it's not that people will be replaced by AI, but people will be replaced by people who use AI effectively in a way that enables them to enhance human connection. So the ability to use, say, for example, even small things, like at the moment, like when we used to have meetings, it used to be that, you'd have to take notes, and, part of it would be trying to pay attention. The other half would be trying and make sure that but actually now we don't have to worry about that. It's like I can have a meeting with lots of people throughout the day. And I know that ultimately I'll get those notes that everything I'll get back, I'll be able to then sort of just reflect on. And then, but that enables me to have a better human connection in those moments, to have more impactful moments in those meetings with people,
So
because
I
human connection is there.
agree
I'm
with
not worried
you.
about all those elements.
I agree with you with a caveat.
Mm-hmm.
You then have to do due diligence on the company that's doing the note taking to make
Absolutely.
sure that they're private, that they're not shared, that they're not
Absolutely.
used to train AI. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about what the future could look like and what it should look like. And there's some really, so a lot of people, so we talked, for instance, about how people are disengaged at work, right? There are certain parts of, even if you love what you do, there are certain parts of what you do that are either terribly boring or repetitive or drain your soul. And if you could hive those off to,
Uh-huh.
for instance, an agent, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really cool. So when a company, but I'm not talking about an agent that belongs to the company. Imagine a future where that agent belongs to you. And so when a company hires you, they're actually hiring you and your agents. You could also subcontract your agents to be part of a library for other companies who want that particular skill set. So it's not the company that's harvesting your insight and your intelligence and building their own agents for their own companies, but it's actually building assets for yourself that enable you to live the life you want to live. I find that absolutely fascinating. I also find it interesting how, so the companies that will excel in the future. So there's this, when you study companies, it's fascinating because companies act like they own people and people behave like they're owned by companies, which is a bit nuts, really, because if you think about it, it's a symbiotic relationship. You need both. But so I did a lot of research as to engagement and talent optimization and meaningful work and et cetera, et cetera. And the companies that are best at attracting and retaining top talent are kind of like platforms that enable people to fulfill their potential and their aspirations. We need to look at companies through that lens. And that's interesting. I love looking at personal AI. I love looking at agents, agentic AI. Love looking at, for instance, hiring tools. Some hiring tools today give lots of insight to the company on the candidate. But again, this is power asymmetry, and the technology is just magnifying that power asymmetry. But wouldn't it be really, really cool if instead you had a tool that gave insights also to the candidate about the company? So there is a more engaged kind of level of decision making, more data to make wiser decisions on where people should deploy their time and talent. Because money is replaceable. Time is not.
Mm-hmm.
Time is so valuable. And then the other thing about how companies operate, email and things like that were supposed to make us more efficient. I don't know. I think we've got much, much higher burnout these days than ever before, and people expect an instantaneous response. Well, that's also nuts, right? So if we're deploying this technology and expecting more from our humans, we're going to break them. What we should be doing instead is harvesting this, like carving out some time for people to expand their mind, expand their curiosity, see where that takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of interest, you've obviously researched this very heavily, and you've obviously got your red flags, and you've obviously got your eyes firmly on certain companies. Now, obviously, we're not going to talk about particular companies that you've got your eye on, but to the layman, to the average person who just works for a company and just going on with life and just trying to get through every day and just trying to use tools that they've got access to, Like, they're not always going to have like the time to sort of navigate, like, well, what's this company doing with this and what's that, so is there a place where people can go to that they can sort of, get that information quite quickly, or a way that they can sort of go, well, actually, I'm not going to go with that product because they lean more towards this direction, which is quite dangerous, or, how do people navigate that?
I am so glad you asked that question. Thank you. Okay, so anyone who's listening to this who has an idea on how to do that, please get in touch with me, because this is one area I would love to find really amazing founders and get them the backing that they need, because people are time poor, right? And so it is easy to take advantage of people. So there's another phenomenal book for those people who have time to read the book. I highly recommend it. Otherwise, you can look up some videos by the author, who is Shoshana Zuboff. And the name of the book is called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And there was some research done. It's actually quite old now. It's probably about 10 years. This particular data point is, if you were to read all the privacy policies and terms and conditions of every single app and website you are going to use, do you know how much time you'd need?
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah.
63 working days. This is technology that is supposed to make us more efficient, supposed to help us. This is insane. So they hide all this stuff in the small print. Well, no one reads the privacy policies, but of course, before you use anything, you have to click I accept. Now, interestingly, in this book that Shoshana did a phenomenal job in researching, and it's awesome, is most people just click I accept. They don't even adjust
Absolutely.
privacy, because the companies that lobbied to put pressure on, there was a lot of pressure on that one particular button. There was a lot of behavioral science that went into it, because they knew that, short term, people want it, etc. So do, at least, if you're listening to this, at least go and adjust your privacy settings. That would be great. There are certain platforms like OpenAI where it's actually really, and ChatGPT, it's actually quite hard to find the privacy settings, but please go through and adjust your settings. Don't do things on default. That would be great. And again, if there are any founders who want to tackle that problem, it's a problem worth solving. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Give me your most controversial opinion about AI. One that makes investors or business leaders uncomfortable.
Gosh. It's really, really hard to not follow the crowd. When there's all this noise around a handful of companies, it's really hard to hold yourself back. But there's another wave of technology that's coming through. And so if you hold on to that capital, keep your dry powder for the new wave of technology that's coming down the line, you will have way more upside. So if we want AI to be an ally to humanity, what does that mean? Okay, so first of all, it's going to be trust by design. It's going to be trusted. What does that mean? Well, privacy matters, right? So if I'm having a conversation with an LLM and the company can actually see what those conversations are, well, that's not trust by design, and it's not privacy by design. If the company uses access to all your emails and all your chats to get even stronger profiles on you, that is not privacy by design. When Socrates said, know thyself, I don't think he meant for the fangs to know us. I think we should know ourselves better than the big tech companies know ourselves. Imagine, okay, let me give you an example of the next wave of technology. So what people don't realize is the majority of their decisions have been steered by algorithms for the last 10, 15 years. Whether it comes to your search choices, your shopping choices, etc. Your attention, your dollar spend, your job applications have all been driven by algorithms. You've been led by the nose. Imagine, however, if you had personal AI, which was built based on what matters to you. So if we look at the sustainability space, for instance, the research says more people want products that are ethical and sustainable. That may be, but ultimately what gets funded gets done, and people will buy what's convenient, cost effective, and what pops up in their algorithm, right? So if you had a personal AI that you could customize based on what matters to you, and then you're shopping for something or you're looking for a job, and it comes up with big algo on the one hand, and it comes up with your reprioritized options based on what your personal algorithm is reorienting towards. Then you have a choice on what to buy, because human is always in charge, not human in the loop, human in command. And you choose either the big algo option or your algo option. At the end of every day or every week or every month, depending on how you have put the settings, it gives you your personal balance sheet. This is what you say you stand for. This is what you're actually doing in practice. Do you want to adjust your settings? What do you want to do? So it's not nudging you by itself. You are always helping it decide how to help you, if that makes sense.
Okay, I do, and I get that, and I think it's a utopian ideal, which I think is obviously it's obviously attainable.
It's very doable.
Of course, it's very attainable. Now, my issue is that we're sometimes these things are driven by power structures that are outside our control. So, if I'm part of a country that is a dictatorship, then that personal AI or that person is going to be driven by what they want me to be, not what I want or what I think I want to be. Right. So the same technology can then be used under different waves for a different purpose. No?
No, because you are doing the settings. And the irony is, if we look at the States and Silicon Valley, where a lot of this tech is coming from, the big algos are actually so a handful of people in the States are actually determining how the rest of the world operates. Talk about dictatorships. We talk about democracies where we vote, but we have zero control over our data. There was an article I wrote a while ago, actually was inspired by one of the conversations we had in our AEDT working group, which was, if AI and data existed in the time of the founding fathers in the States, how would that have turned out? How would it have been treated in the Constitution? If anyone wants to have a look at that, I'd welcome your thoughts. It was co-written with a few LLMs as well. That's a really cool thing about some LLMs. Like, they're really neat to brainstorm with. And it's interesting how some of them improve, how some of them degrade the personalities that they have. I love running experiments on them. They're fascinating. But neurosymbolic is more trusted and explainable by design. So if we go back to the origins of AI, there were two schools of thought, and I'm oversimplifying things here. One was kind of hard coded, like the rules of the road, so to speak, which was more breakable, it was more fragile. And the other was more trying to replicate the plasticity of how humans think, which is more the neural. One got more funding, and the other side kind of went into its own kind of winter. But now when you combine the two, you get the best of both worlds. So you get technology that is more trusted because it's explainable, more transparent, and more accurate. Now that's a much better technology to deploy in higher risk environments where getting it wrong has very bad implications. So financial services and healthcare, etc. So I find that space fascinating. there's another wave that's coming, and I'm really excited about that wave.
I can sense, I think you can sense that you're obviously excited about what the future holds, especially with the capabilities that are on the horizon. Can you break that down into a kind of learning and development perspective in terms of, I appreciate there's bigger things than learning and development per se, that AI and the next wave is going to have, but in terms of learning and development for individuals, for organizations, for companies that are looking to the future in terms of how they're going to train their workforce, how they're going to train, how they, move forward with the times, what impacts do you expect to see over the next 5 years with this?
So I'm glad you brought it back to learning and development, because it's an essential piece of the puzzle. One thing I don't like to hear is all the fear mongering about the loss of jobs. So when it comes to implementing AI, it's essential that boards and C-suites upskill themselves on the potential and also the impacts, the opportunities and the downsides, and they need to navigate with absolute responsibility. If you are deploying, and you also have to change your business operations, and you need to challenge yourselves to not just do things faster, but do better things. That would be great. And there are playbooks for every single one of the things that I'm touching upon. If a company is deploying a technology and they are going to reduce costs and overhead and cull a bunch of people, then it would be wise, responsible, and ethical to put a percentage of those savings into retraining, reskilling, and rehoming the workforce. If we have mass unemployment, we're actually going to have a huge dent on the economy, because who's actually going to buy the products and services that companies produce? Hope is not going to get us there. Intention is going to get us there. We cannot sleepwalk into the future. Every single company has got to have its own roadmap. And it will become your USP. It will become your edge and how you navigate the tech landscape. And not everyone will do it the same, and that's okay. And that's actually good, because if everyone were to do the same thing, then we wouldn't be learning, right? I think it's and there's so many. There's no shortage of solutions, but to find the solutions, we need to challenge our outdated ways of looking at things and default ways of thinking. We need to upgrade how we think and how we decide. And, it's funny because we have a phone upgrade, every few weeks, every month. All our applications on our computers and our operating systems are constantly upgraded. And when's the last time humans upgraded themselves? It's, And I think it's time that we became kinder to each other, where loyalty matters, not putting people in boxes, creating circumstances for, if we look back, there's some amazing stories of how some of the most innovative ideas didn't come from the executive team or from their R&D team, but from, the janitor who, would be sensitive to how customers are engaging. So being curious and listening to people from all walks of life, I think this is what will help us succeed. It's, in order to thrive in the future, we need to bring out the best in our humanity. We have homogenized human beings. We have homogenized kids in schools. Companies have not wanted people to be human. They have wanted them to be professional. And now we are investing billions of dollars in making technology human. We're insane. We need to enable humans to be the best versions of themselves. And wouldn't companies be great if we could do that? I know it sounds utopian, but actually it isn't. I have had the privilege of working with companies who have this approach. And it is mind-blowing to see. And I'm not talking about charities. I'm talking about hard-nosed bankers. And if they can do it, anyone can do it.
Last question. If there's one thing you want people to remember from the conversation today, what would it be?
You know that hunch you always had, like that thing you're always curious about? Start investigating it.
All right, let's leave it there. Deborah, thank you for joining the Future of Learning. And
Thank you.
I'm sure we could have gone on for a lot longer, but we'll leave it there for today, and maybe in the future we'll explore themes as they unravel again. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.